Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. China's President Xi Jinping arrives in Cambodia to conclude a three-nation tour amidst global trade tensions. Cambodia seeks increased Chinese investment as Xi promotes regional stability amidst US tariffs. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and envoy Steve Witkoff meet European leaders in Paris to discuss Ukraine's ceasefire and Iran nuclear deal. Ukrainian officials arrive unannounced to urge tougher US stance on Russia after deadly strike in Sumy. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is all set to meet Donald Trump in Washington. In fact, Meloni, of course, is aiming to protect EU trade while staying in his good books. With 67 billion euros in exports at stake, she pushes for a zero tariff deal as Rome slashes its growth forecast. US and Ukraine make significant progress towards a minerals agreement to boost economic ties and support Ukraine's recovery. Ukraine's first Deputy Prime Minister confirms plans to sign a deal soon, marking a step forward in the bilateral partnership. Reports coming out of Gaza say that Israeli airstrikes have hit displaced Palestinian camps, killing at least 25. The deadliest strike in Khan Yunis killed 16 and wounded 23. Other attacks in Beit Lahia and near Al-Mawasi killed 9 more. Trump meets Japan's trade envoy and says they're making great progress. However, Japan fails to secure immediate tariff relief as he claims over 75 countries are seeking US trade relief deals. Asian stocks edge up while the dollar firms slightly amidst US-Japan trade talks and Fed Chair Powell's warnings on tariff-induced slowdown. Tech shares remain under pressure following negative forecasts, with investors awaiting TSMC earnings for industry insights. Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman arrives in Tehran for high-level meetings just days before crucial Iran-US nuclear talks in Rome. The visit signals a potential shift in regional diplomacy as Saudi Arabia engages directly with Iran. Chinese President Xi Jinping has touched down in Phnom Penh, marking the final leg of his Southeast Asia tour. Xi was received with full honors by the Cambodian King Norodom Sihamoni at the Royal Palace. This visit comes as China looks to bolster its regional influence amidst escalating trade tensions with the United States. Xi has met with the Cambodian Senate President Hun Sen. Earlier today, Xi was also in Malaysia, where he pushed for deeper economic partnerships. In Cambodia, he is expected to sign a series of bilateral deals focused on infrastructure, energy, and digital connectivity, all key to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Later in the day, Xi is expected to hold talks with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet as well. Trade will likely be a major topic as Cambodia faces one of the highest US tariff rates. China is one of Cambodia's largest trade partners, accounting for 30% of its trade. Ahead of his visit, Xi Jinping published an article in Cambodian media calling on Cambodia to jointly resist hegemonism and protectionism. Ross Feingold, political risk analyst, is joining us live on the broadcast from Taiwan. Ross, welcome to the show. What do you make of this visit by Xi Jinping to Cambodia? He's, of course, continuing his Go Local endeavor. What all is on the agenda?
It reinforces what was already a very strong relationship. If we put the countries of ASEAN, the 10 ASEAN members, on a spectrum of how close they are to China, certainly Cambodia is going to be at the far end as one of the countries in ASEAN with the closest relationship with China. That's a trade relationship, that's a tourism relationship, and that's a security relationship because of a naval base that China helped build. Now, Cambodia insists that it's not a Chinese naval base, but it's clear that China's Navy has easy access to this naval base. So it's really just reinforcing what already is a very, very close relationship. And much to the consternation of the United States is not happy that Cambodia has such a close relationship with China. But US complaints don't seem to work. And Cambodia, by hosting Xi Jinping, is only reinforcing the strong relationship.
Is this just obviously to be connected with the kind of protectionism that the United States is doing, and obviously this trade war that has erupted between the US and China? Is it to do with that China wants to obviously look at alternatives if the US is serious about continuing with these high tariffs? Also, how will the Cambodians respond to this visit by Xi and endeavors to close ties?
It's clear that China wants the ASEAN countries to take China's side in the tariff dispute. The Trump administration has imposed high tariffs on a number of ASEAN countries. China thinks that's an opening for these countries to stand with China against the United States policies. We'll see how that plays out over the coming months. Certainly the ASEAN members facing high tariffs, like Vietnam or Cambodia, they're not happy about that. But again, countries in ASEAN, they have pre-existing relationship with China, which spans from being very, very close to having smooth relations to even antagonistic relations now in the case of the Philippines. So Xi Jinping is clear from his first stop to his last stop in Malaysia, Vietnam, and Cambodia that his message on this trip is to oppose the United States' use of unilateral high
tariffs. In fact, he was earlier in Malaysia. He was earlier today in Malaysia, where, of course, he's also sought to deepen economic partnership. Obviously, there was a thought behind selecting these three nations in particular for this tour soon after the tariff war, wasn't there?
Certainly, he would receive a positive reception in all these countries. Malaysia is not as close to China as Cambodia is, but Malaysia's Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, he's repeatedly said positive things about China, and he's welcomed Chinese investment as well. So even though he's not as close as Cambodia is, or even Vietnam, he still welcomes Chinese engagement with his country. So we do see a spectrum among the ASEAN countries of how close they are to China, and certainly Malaysia, Cambodia, and Vietnam are three countries where Xi Jinping would get a positive welcome.
All right, in fact, we're getting some breaking news coming in now on the broadcast. French President Emmanuel Macron has just formally welcomed Rubio and Witkoff at the Élysée Presidential Palace. Macron was accompanied by France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot. Their meeting is about to get underway, and the French presidency has said that Macron spoke with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky just before meeting the US delegation. These are, of course, visuals of that meeting that is taking place in France. Now, staying with Europe, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has met with the United States President Donald Trump at the White House to address rising tensions over US tariffs on European goods. Meloni faces the challenge of balancing her support for Trump while managing European criticism over his tariff hikes. Reports suggest she is positioning herself as a bridge between Washington and Brussels, urging Europe not to retaliate despite previous criticism of Trump's policies. In Japan, Finance Minister Katsunobu Kato voiced concerns that the volatility triggered by US tariffs could harm Japan's economic recovery. Kato is all set to visit Washington next week for the IMF and G20 meetings, where Japan will discuss currency issues with the United States. This comes after Japan failed on Wednesday to secure any immediate relief from US tariffs, with Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba saying after his envoy Ryoshi Akazawa held talks in Washington that future negotiations won't be easy. However, he's also stated that Trump has expressed his desire to give the negotiations with Japan the highest priority. Here's what Ryoshi Akazawa had to say.
しから米国の関税措置は極めて遺憾であるということを申し上げ、我が国の産業や日米両国における投資雇用の拡大に与える影響などについて我が国の考えを説明した上で、米国による一連の関税措置の見直しを強く申し入れたところ。
Meanwhile, Malaysia's trade and finance ministers will be traveling to Washington later this month to address the impact of the US tariffs on the country. This move follows a consensus reached by ASEAN nations to jointly tackle tariff concerns with the US. As global trade tensions continue to rise, countries like Italy, Japan, and Malaysia are working to navigate the challenging landscape of US tariffs. In fact, Dr. Satoru Nagao, Fellow Hudson Institute, is joining us live from Tokyo in Japan. Dr. Nagao, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. We've got indications now that the US-Japan talks will not be easy, but what is likely to be the middle ground on the issue of trade and tariffs?
Yes, this is not easy, but at the same time, Japan has advantage this time because view from the President Trump, ally and partner are priority, he says. So that's why Japan is the first priority. And in case of Japan, Japan is the biggest investor last 5 years for the United States. Japan is the biggest investor. So that's why indeed Japan, if Japan invest more, in this case, Japan has a car-to deal. So that's why this is the first advantage Japan has. And second advantage is still Japan's defense budget is reaching to the 2% of GDP. This means that, of course, Japan's government says there is no alternative budget to increase more, but at the same time, indeed, 2% is 2%. Japan can reach the 3% of the GDP or 4% of GDP in the future if the U.S. demand. So that's why, indeed, in this negotiation, Japan has some card to deal with the Trump administration. And the third, and what the most important advantage Japan has is this is the first country which negotiates with President Trump. Because if other country will follow, in this case, that time the Trump administration will say, Japan prepares such kind of good cards for the United States. So how about you? So this means that negotiation with Japan will be the baseline. So if Japan concludes with the United States as a first negotiator with the United States, in this case, Japan can escape after that, but other countries need to prepare more than Japan's preparation. So that's why in this case, the first negotiator with the United States is indeed a big advantage.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, also, meanwhile, we are, of course, learning of ASEAN's negotiations as well. They've decided to negotiate. Ministers from Malaysia expected to arrive in US later this month.
Yes. So that's why the Trump administration start to believe that this country is also important to deal with China. Because in case of the Trump administration policies, always their policy is related to China. When they talk about fentanyl, Canada, Mexico, China, all of the three are important, but Canada, Mexico, the tariff is postponed, but not China. So now the China's tariff reached 245%. This is crazy level, but for other countries, just 10%. So that's why, view from this situation, indeed they focus on national security or counter-China policy, and that view from this background, if the Trump administration tries to negotiate with a Southeast Asian country, of course the main topic will be China.
Yes,
so
Dr. Nagao, also now talking about Europe. The Italian Prime Minister is in the United States currently. Could Giorgia Meloni, because of her closeness with the Trump administration, be a bridge for Europe and the US to negotiate on the issues of tariffs?
Yes, in this case, both sides want Meloni will be the first representative of Europe because view from the US side, Meloni is one kind of ally for the Trump administration. And view from Europe, this is a bridge between US and Europe. So she is very important. Both American side and European side rely on her. So that is the current situation, I believe. So that's why her visit could be the game changer, the relation between US and Europe. That is their wish, and both sides wish to be.
All right. Appreciate you joining us, Dr. Satoru Nagao, with your perspective on that big story. Moving on now, Gaza's civil defense agencies reported today that a series of Israeli airstrikes have hit several displaced Palestinian encampments, killing at least 37 people. The agency confirmed that an overnight strike in the Al-Mawasi area of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza resulted in 16 deaths, including many women and children, and left 23 others wounded. The strike, carried out by 2 Israeli missiles, directly hit tents housing displaced families. Let's listen in to the eyewitnesses.
قاعدين في امان الله هلا شفنا شيء هيك بضوي احمر فقعت بعدها الخيام قلنا هي الخيام بنحرقن ايش في هذه منطقه امنه مواصي إلا هو فجرت المكان، قالوا لنا اطلعوا من الخيمة على البحر. لا احنا طلعنا لقيت هالخيم بتنحرق، اللي جنبهم ايش فيه؟ حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. ايش عملوا لهم اطفال صغار؟ اطفال اشلاء طلعوا زي ما هم. ايش فيه؟ اي انسانيه اللي بيحكوا عنه.
هذا المكان امن، احنا كنا مش امنين هيك الحين. بعد اللي شفناه اطفال قاعده تنحرق داخل الخيمه، تمام، مش قادرين نعمل لهم اي شيء. من ضمنهم طفل مقعد كان قاعد، تمام، قاعد بنحرق، احنا مش عارفين نسوي اي شيء.
Well, meanwhile, officials also reported 2 additional attacks on other camps, which resulted in 8 more deaths and several injuries. In Beit Lahia in northern Gaza, 7 people were killed in a strike on tents, while another attack near Al-Mawasi killed a father and his child. The strikes have raised the death toll amongst displaced Palestinians, already struggling with limited shelter and resources amidst the ongoing conflict. Meanwhile, 2 official leaders have confirmed that talks on an Israeli truce proposal are nearly complete, with a response expected soon, potentially by the end of the day, once discussions are finalized. On the other hand, Israel has declared that 30% of Gaza is now a buffer zone as its military offensive intensifies. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reaffirmed Israel's commitment to blocking humanitarian aid into the territory. The renewed air and ground assaults have ended a 2-month ceasefire, with the UN reporting that around 500,000 Palestinians have been displaced since March 18, calling it Gaza's worst humanitarian crisis since the conflict began. Israeli forces have struck over 1,200 targets, and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated Gaza is becoming smaller and more isolated. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has instructed his team to continue negotiations for the release of hostages held by officials. Officials are reportedly preparing a formal response to Israel's latest ceasefire and hostage deal proposal. Ross Feingold, a political risk analyst, is back with us on the broadcast. He's in fact live from Taiwan. Ross Feingold, where do you see this conflict headed with these latest assaults by Israel?
It seems that Israel is going to continue its assaults and/or occupation of territory, whether that's in Gaza, in Syria, or in Lebanon, where there's been significant Israel military activity in the past 24 hours. And the United States is firmly behind the Netanyahu government of Israel in Israel's actions up to now. So whether that's proceeding with attacking Hamas in Gaza, occupying land in Gaza, Syria, or Lebanon, the Trump administration is firmly behind Israel. And at the same time, there still is talks going on through intermediaries about reaching a new ceasefire in Gaza. It's going to be a big challenge to reach a consensus on a ceasefire, but at least the sides are still talking through the intermediaries.
Ross, as far as, of course, now the situation in Gaza is concerned, what are the reports you are getting? Because reportedly Israel is trying to block humanitarian assistance as well, even as, of course, the area of the conflict, of course, continues to grow, and people continue to get put in a very limited space in the middle of Gaza. What are the latest situations on ground? What are the reports you are getting?
Yeah, the United Nations has been very outspoken in recent days about the humanitarian situation and the lack of food, water, and fuel in Gaza. Now, perhaps this is going to encourage or spur Hamas to reach some kind of accommodation with Israel for a ceasefire that would include a resumption of the deliveries of humanitarian aid. For now, Israel's position is that there's sufficient amount of food, fuel, and water in Gaza, even though international NGOs and the UN are saying something different. But again, ultimately, in my own opinion, this is up to Hamas, because Hamas still claims to be the governing authority. It's Hamas that started the war. And if Hamas wants humanitarian aid to be delivered to the population of Gaza, they're going to have to agree to release hostages and not insist that Israel make a full military withdrawal, which is something that Israel is not going to agree on as part of a ceasefire at the current time.
Yes. What about the the negotiations to get out the hostages? What kind of progress has been made on that front?
Well, both sides are going to have to relent a little bit, whether that's Hamas or the government of Israel. And it's very difficult to say which side has the upper hand. But again, I would say that Israel might have an advantage because of the denial of aid, however terrible that might be. But it's Hamas that's going to have to relent and agree to release a significant number of the hostages, because the Palestinians in Gaza, they need the aid, they need water, they need fuel, they need food. And they're looking towards their leadership, which is Hamas, to allow that aid in. So I think Hamas is going to have to relent and agree to release hostages in order for there to be a ceasefire. But Hamas's position that Israel needs to withdraw entirely, frankly, that's just not realistic.
Yes, also, Ross, as far as, of course, now, pressure from, the West and the Middle East is concerned, is that working to bring about a deal, to bring about a ceasefire? Because suddenly those talks have hit a stalemate, it seems.
Certainly Egypt and Qatar, they've been the intermediaries multiple times between Hamas and Israel. I think both sides, both Israel and Hamas, trust the ability of Egypt and Qatar to serve as intermediaries. I think both sides also trust the United States as well, notwithstanding that the United States firmly supports Israel. And obviously Hamas knows that. But as far as passing messages and outlining a framework of an agreement, I think even Hamas realizes that the United States plays a role in that process as well. So there are interlocutors. It's really a question, I think, again, both sides have to relent a little bit, but it's probably going to be Hamas that has to relent more than Israel, because Hamas has to drop its demand that Israel make a full military withdrawal before there's a ceasefire.
Ross Feingold, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that big story. And that's all the time we have for today. We will continue to bring you more news and updates from around the world. Stay tuned to NewsX World.